The topic of fasting comes up every now and then, and it's worthwhile to review the importance, or rather the necessity, of practicing some form of self-denial. So notice that our Lord says that while the bridegroom is with them, they do not fast, but when the bridegroom is taken away from them, then they will fast. He's referring to his disciples, of course. So when Christ is taken away, the followers of Christ will practice fasting. It's interesting that all the major religions in the world practice some form of fasting. And there's many benefits to fasting. I'll just mention just a few of them. But when we fast, it makes it so that we are actually, there's physical benefits also. So when we fast, there's physical benefits. The organs of our body are given an opportunity to cleanse themselves, which is actually very beneficial. People are a lot healthier when they practice fasting, especially if it's prolonged fasting. But anyways, it cleanses the body, so there's these physical benefits. Also, when a person fasts, they're actually able to focus more. There's less blood going to the digestive organs, and so the person is clear-headed, even though they may be experiencing a certain amount of hunger. Fasting also enables us to grow in self-mastery, self-control, because by saying no to the desire to eat, we're learning to say no to other temptations also. So we're strengthening the will, doing something that goes against the grain. And when we fast and when we experienced hunger or the pains of hunger, it also enables us to relate to others who might be suffering as we are suffering. So in other words, we have greater compassion for those who are hungry, for those who are starving in third world countries. We have greater compassion. We have a greater ability to understand their plight, their predicament. And not only for people who are experiencing the same type of thing, but we become more aware and concerned about the sufferings of others in general. And this is extremely good for us. The other benefit of fasting is that it withdraws our heart from worldly things. So because we're not focused on food or things that satisfy the senses, it's easier for us to pray when we fast and to focus on God. And this would seem to be the primary benefit of fasting, as indicated in today's gospel reading, because our Lord says, while the bridegroom is with them, they don't need to fast. So in other words, fasting facilitates our ability to get closer to the bridegroom, who is Christ, to get closer to God. So that's like the number one benefit of fasting. So fasting in the early church, the early Christians fasted 3 times a week. During Lent, they would fast every single day. And it was a pretty severe fast. So the modern stipulation for Catholics is there's only 2 days that you're really required to fast: Ash Wednesday and Good Friday. However, it is Friday today. In fact, it's the first Friday of the month, and because it's the first Friday, you are encouraged to receive Holy Communion with the intention of making reparation to the Sacred Heart of Jesus for all the offenses committed against him. And every Friday is a day of abstinence from meat traditionally. In modern times, the Church has allowed or enabled Catholics to substitute some other penance or some act of charity that you normally would not do on a given day. And because the Church made it so that people can substitute, it's kind of like people just lost sight of the fact that Friday is a day of penance, a day of abstinence. And why is Friday a day of penance or abstinence? Well, because it's the day on which our Lord died, but it's also the Church's way of getting us to practice some form of self-denial, which is extremely beneficial for us. And as I mentioned, when we fast or practice self-denial, we're better able to relate to the sufferings of others, which means we're also better able to relate to the sufferings of Christ, which helps us appreciate his sufferings even more, which means we grow in devotion to our Lord. which means we grow in holiness, we grow in our relationship with God. So extremely beneficial. Now, recently I encountered more than one individual who said, oh, I'm past a certain age, so I'm exempt from the Friday abstinence rule. And that's not right. That's not correct. So when it comes to fasting, the requirement of the church is that anyone who's 18 years old or older, up until the age of 59, once you reach your 59th birthday, the day after, you don't need to fast anymore. You're dispensed. This is fasting. But when it comes to abstinence from meat on Fridays or observing Friday as a day of penance, that is required on everyone in the church from the age of 14 and older, up until the time of your death, even though you might be 103 years old. So this is required for everyone. Now, prior to modern times, it was actually considered a serious sin if you did not observe these requirements of the church. Now, even in the modern times, during the season of Lent, every Friday, it's more strict that you abstain from meat. In other words, during Lent, you don't have this option of substituting other penances. Throughout the year, you do. Now, the only exception would be if the Friday was a solemnity. I thought also a feast would suffice to dispense, but I recently looked it up, and it's only a solemnity. If we had a solemnity when we have the Creed, as the Gloria and the Creed, only then would it be a day of feasting and not a day of abstinence. So if it's just a memorial or optional memorial like we have today, or if it was just a feast with just the Gloria, you're still required to observe Friday as a day of abstinence. Now, as I mentioned in prior to modern times, it was the church had the authority to say, okay, if you're not doing this, it's a mortal sin if you willfully neglect to do this. In modern times, it's not so serious, but we should take it more seriously. Why? Because it's so beneficial for us, for our own sanctification, for our growth in our relationship with God. You know, today is the optional memorial of Saint Teresa of Calcutta, Mother Teresa of Calcutta. And why is it that she was able to give of herself to serve the poorest of the poor? In order to be able to give of ourselves, we need to have self-mastery, self-control, but we also have to be in the habit of denying ourselves. And when we deny ourselves, we're also more likely or more capable of seeing the needs of others and denying ourselves to be at their service. And this is exactly what she did. So why was she such a great saint? Because she practiced self-denial. Why is it that you and I are not great saints? Because we don't practice self-denial enough. Or that, at least that's one of the reasons. There may be other reasons. So it's just a good reminder. So yes, today is a Friday. It's the first Friday also. So practice some form of abstinence. Now sure, you have the option of substituting. Some people might say, okay, Friday I'm not going to watch any TV. Every other day of the week I watch TV, but Fridays, nope. Or, you know, I'm going to not use my cell phone on Friday. Imagine that. Or I'm not going to check my emails. No gadgets or no social media at all on Friday. You could do that, sure. It's very easy to abstain from meat. You know, in olden days, my mom would tell me, oh, it was only on Sundays that people were fortunate enough to be able to eat meat. And now it's like people have it every single day. We just take it for granted. So it's not that big of a sacrifice. It's not that difficult to do. The problem is we lack the strength of will. And by practicing self-denial, by practicing abstinence, we actually strengthen our strength of will, which we need, which is required for us to be able to have self-mastery, self-control, so that we can say no to temptation and say yes to doing the will of God, even when it is difficult. Just a few announcements. It is the first Friday, so this evening after the evening Mass, we will have the all-night vigil of adoration. And also tomorrow, Saturday at 4 p.m., we will have the Living Rosary organized by the Legion of Mary, and everyone is invited and encouraged to participate in that. And the reason we're having the Living Rosary is in anticipation of the Nativity of Our Lady. So the Feast of the Nativity of Our Lady, which is on Monday. Monday after the morning Mass, the Legion of Mary will have a cake and maybe even ice cream in the parish hall. So you can all participate in that to celebrate Our Lady's birth.